advanced class in a sense. Maybe not technically, because once you have the basic skills to be able to do the kind of emphasis that I want to do today, you can do it quite easily. It's just a matter of being able to wrap your head around kind of a structured protocol that will give you a really dramatic result. And what I'm talking about today is I'm going to start with, the discussion is on repetitive stress disorders, repetitive stress origination chronic syndromes. In other words, syndromes, pain syndromes, disability syndromes that in their origin they derive from overuse of a body part. And technically speaking, even though from other therapeutic disciplines, a repetitive stress or a syndrome, injury, disability of one body part is considered almost a separate discipline from the same injury, same structure, same origination of a problem with any other body part. So if you have a stress syndrome in your hand, well, that's completely different than a stress syndrome in your foot. For a hand, you go to an orthopedic hand surgeon. For your foot, you go to a podiatrist. Okay? And maybe you'll go to somebody else if it's your shoulder. But actually, you can create an injury that's chronic to any body part if you use it the wrong way long enough. And in fact, what we call trauma, acute trauma, can be just as simple as using the body part the wrong way one time. One time. And it is also, and we would call that an accident. An accident that causes an injury. And then that injury is referred to as a trauma. It's acute because it's sudden onset. It happened in a moment or relatively fast. Like a car wreck, but a car wreck can happen in a moment, but actually a lot of car wrecks actually happen over a few moments. Can happen over 8, 10, 12, even 30 seconds, a car wreck unfolding, right? Especially if it's a multi-vehicle type of incursion, all right, event, all right? But in the body, even a one-time traumatic event, an accident, injury, can actually set up a template for a chronic problem that not only exists over time, but it can actually escalate and become more acute over time. You can have an acute injury, which happens instantly, like getting punched in the nose and it breaks your nose. And it's traumatic and it's acute, and it's painful, it's dramatic, maybe there's a broken bone involved, okay? Maybe you have to have the septum reset, maybe you have to have surgery to correct it, maybe the bones are cracked or what, but then it heals mostly, but then over time the scar tissue and literally, in my opinion, the localized energy disruption of the traumatic injury actually over time creates the foundation for a chronic issue, which in my example of the broken nose could be chronic sinusitis, chronic infections, chronic inflammation in the nasal cavity or in the facial or maxillary or orofacial bones of the face, okay? Now, the chances that you're going to have kind of a repetitive stress syndrome based on your nose is really quite small, okay? You would have to, someone would have to punch you in your nose repetitively over a long period of time, which I guess, depending on your attitude, might be possible. But for most of us, we develop repetitive stress in the extremities: arms, legs, wrist, elbows, knees, ankles, feet, hips, shoulders. And we also have to think of individual spinal segments as being joints that may be overworked or overused in this same fashion as well. Okay? But mostly we're talking about hips, extremities. And one of the things, extreme case of the degradation, the deterioration, the depression in function that can take place over time because of repetitive stress is it is actually a fundamental original cause of what ends up with many, many people having to have joints replaced. So artificial hip, artificial knee, artificial shoulder, artificial elbow, and so on and so forth. That the genesis of that great deterioration might have started as an acute trauma, an accident, an impact, a fall, a slip, fall, trip. Could have happened on the ice, could have happened in a wreck, could have fallen off a bicycle, could have happened, but what set up the inclination to the weakness was a trauma. All right? So when we look at repetitive stress and helping people to recover from repetitive stress syndromes and injuries, we actually try to consider original cause. And not only is that original cause in many, many cases, and I'm talking about, like I'm going to talk in real detail about carpal tunnel syndrome, but carpal tunnel, the way we treat it, you can use to treat 100 other things. That's why it's like my poster child treatment for repetitive stress, because using this protocol, I can treat 100 different things successfully with just a little variation for a body part. Okay? But when we talk about fundamental causes and accident, injury, trauma, and so on, we also have to take into account the emotional aftermath of all traumas. In other words, I'm just going to say it this way. It is impossible to get punched in anger and not be hurt. Impossible. That could be a myth, that you could be punched in anger and not be hurt. The fact that there may be no visible injury is irrelevant, because the angry manhandling, the angry punch, has an emotional impact that simultaneously is encoded into the tissue and simultaneously becomes an unresolved negative emotion that is stored in the tissue, which, depending on the severity, depending on the context, depending on repetition, okay, that emotional context may be far more than the trauma context of acute injury and so on. But it's the emotional context of the trauma that sets up the background, okay, the environment that is going to be subject to stress in the future. So it's not enough to say that you have carpal tunnel in your wrist, and we know that that the carpal tunnel itself is between the bones here at the base of the palm. We know that, okay? And that there's a problem there. And the problem, of course, is inflammation, scar tissue, pain, paresthesia, neurasthenia, inhibition of innervation of nerves and sensitivity, range of motion or use or strength, or even outright atrophy and so on of the hand, usually accompanied with swelling in the forearm, usually accompanied by tennis elbow-like symptoms. In my opinion, every person I've ever treated for carpal tunnel also had problems with the shoulder and their neck and their low back and hips. Why? Because the wrist doesn't exist by itself. The wrist is not an island in some distant sea of the body where there is not real-time communication and support from the mainland. It's not like that. Okay? It's actually, the hand is integral. Why? Because, well, let's go to Ayurveda. Ayurveda teaches us that the hands are the organ of expression of the heart, of Anahata Chakra. The hands are the organ of expression of the heart. So any injury, any trauma, any diminishment of function, any restriction or disease process in the hands of any kind is an impediment on the free flow of energy and expression of prana and consciousness, which is originating in the microcosmic orbit of Anahata Chakra, or of the heart. Because that is a continuous circuit. It doesn't end at the hand. It's not actually how it works. Microcosmic orbit is like this. It's the small orbit of manifestation. In other words, we have the higher energies of heaven and the lower energies of earth coming together in the center or core, energetic core of the body. That's why the yantra is two triangles interlace, one facing up, one facing down. The one is representative of the lower energies and one is representative of the higher energies, and they come together, and then when that two interlaced triangles spin, they create a three-dimensional structure called a tetrahedron. The tetrahedron is actually the essence of the tree of life, and it is the essence geometry of infinite being becoming concrete and manifest. So when there is restriction and inhibition in the hands, there is restriction and inhibition in the person's whole being, ability to express who they are in the world. Now, I don't know if that's a chicken or egg thing, because remember I said that the genesis of this can be traumatic. All right? But in most cases, it's traumatic in the past, which sets up an inclination to weakness, which manifests over time, and now we find ourselves in a way of life, job, activity, performance, whatever it is, that is highly targeted on that particular body part, which is energetically weak already, which then cannot adequately adapt to the stress and pressure that's being put on it. And of course, since, as the Thai say, every part of the body has Quan, or an intelligent entity that rules it, another way we could say is the innate, okay? The innate of the hand that is chronically weak because of old unresolved negative emotional issues and aftermath of ancient trauma, which may have been substantial to cause dislocation or scar tissue or damage structurally, but that was never fully recovered, never fully resolved. Okay? Maybe it was subclinical, like you fell down or you fell off your skateboard or you fell off your bicycle and you slammed onto the palm of your hand and it went numb, like your whole hand went numb, and then it hurt and it turned red and it swelled up. But you know, you shake it and you're like, shake it off, and you're like, everybody's like, oh my God, are you okay? And you look at it and it seems like everything's relatively where it's supposed to be. So you go, yeah, I'm fine. I'm embarrassed. I got a bad case of the stupid, dumb, and uglies. It's not bad enough that I fell down. I had to fall down in front of people who instantly are going to make fun of me. No compassion whatsoever. We call them our friends. Their first inclination, not compassion. How we know they're our friends, okay? And what we don't know is we actually caused substantial injury. Enough so that there is an inflammation response to the trauma and a swelling response, that there's actually damage to the bursa of the tendons and connective tissue, perhaps bruising on the ends of the bones. There's a dislocation of these really flexible, mobile bones in the hand, so they are no longer perfectly in alignment with the scapula and with the radial and with the ulnar bones of the rest of the hand and the arm. There's some subtle impingement on the nerve. And there's a little bit of an emotional package with it altogether. Now that happened 15 years ago. That happened 20 years ago. And maybe it's subconscious. You don't realize that even though you're right-handed, there are certain things that you just don't like to do with your right hand. And you don't know why. It's just that motion doesn't feel strong. If you bend your wrist a certain way, or you try to grab something a certain way, or you try to lean on your wrist a certain way, it just doesn't feel comfortable. It just doesn't feel right. It just doesn't feel strong. That's subconscious. But because of the work or the job or whatever you're doing, you have to use it, and so you do. And the way that the innate of that body part tells you that this is inappropriate is it begins to shut you down. And the first symptom of the repetitive stress is I call it unease. In other words, just not so comfortable doing what you're doing. Whether it's grabbing, twisting, throwing, lifting, bending, kneeling. You just something about the motion. You have some unease about it, but you work through that. What? Because you're a professional. Okay? The next symptom that you can't see is there starts to be some inflammation. Okay? And you could also say there's an inclination toward rheumatic symptoms. You guys can look up rheumatoid, rheumatic, arthritic. Look up rheumatoid, rheumatic, arthritic. And you're going to see something in almost all chronic injuries, all chronic syndrome issues with joints are going to be on that list. Okay, in that definition. The inflammation acts as a splinting mechanism, but it also acts as an inhibitory mechanism. In other words, the splinting part is to actually try and, it actually is a functional part of trying to support the tissue by creating pressure. But it also has the inhibitory part because once the inflammation gets to a certain point of development, okay, you start to lose the ability to use the body part. It starts to splint it so much you cannot bend it or you cannot flex with it. That inflammation can go, for example, in the case of the wrist, until the inflamed tissue physically begins to impinge on the radial nerve. And as it physically begins to impinge on the radial nerve, you start to develop weakness first, the numbness and tingling, especially in the three outer fingers of the hand. Especially in the outer three fingers of the hand. And I'm not going to go into all the clinical tests, the orthopedic and clinical tests for carpal tunnel syndrome. Actually, I've already done that. That's in another video, okay? With a nice discussion. It's very scientific and all that with the anatomy and that. So I'm not going to recreate that there. I'm just going to say it's part of the process. Numbness, tingling. Weakness, numbness, tingling. Weakness, numbness, tingling. Followed by pain. Followed by immobility. And while that's happening, things are starting to balloon. They're starting to swell. They may become visibly irritated as far as you can see a difference in color. If you compare the two hands and you start to see that the palm of one is red and white, where the other is normal tone. Okay? And the one that has a normal tone doesn't have the numbness and tingling. The one that has a normal tone doesn't have the weakness. See, those are obvious signs and symptoms, right? It doesn't matter if this is carpal tunnel, tennis elbow, frozen shoulder, rotator cuff injury, military neck. It doesn't matter. These mechanisms can apply to all of these things. It can also apply to problems with the ankles. It can apply to problems with the knees. They can attach to problems with the hips. So the trick is, what do we do with that? Well, the first thing is, as I've kind of alluded to a little bit up to this point, is understand that no matter what the obvious issue is, no matter what it's been diagnosed as, or no matter what it's called, okay, that is not an accurate assessment unless that assessment includes mental faculties, emotional faculties, history, nutritional environment, which is referring to toxicities and deficiencies. Because aside from the emotional traumatic origins, which are so quite common, okay? Aside from that, you also have predilections for weakness, injury, chronic inflammation, and deterioration of tendon, connective tissue, bursa, and so on, which is completely nutritional. So if you have someone who has carpal tunnel or any other repetitive stress syndrome that you're treating, and you don't look at their nutritional profile as it regards deficiencies and toxicities, excesses and deficiencies, okay, you can do all the carpal tunnel treatments in the world, even surgery, and guess what? It either won't work or it will come back. Because part of the origin of that breakdown in the first place is nutritional. Literally, if I starve you, I can make you subject to almost any kind of stress breakdown. Just with that one factor alone. Starving people are subject to physical breakdown. Literally, even to the point of where their bones are so brittle that they can actually fracture a bone lifting their own body weight. Okay? In extreme circumstances, we call that osteoporotic disease. Osteoporosis. But osteoporosis wasn't first diagnosed in somebody's grandma. Okay? Osteoporosis was widely first diagnosed in prisoners of war who had gone through long-term starvation. That they were brittle, they were fragile, and inflamed all at the same time. Dehydration can contribute to this, so you have to check dehydration. That's why in other talks and lectures where I talk about Metabolic Syndrome, which is taking into account all of these indexes of nutrition, hydration, metabolism, okay, age, exposure to toxins, chemicals, radiation, okay? These all have to be considered. And at some point in the treatment, they all have to be brought to bear, okay? So we have to have a mental part. That's done by survey and conversation and actually listening to people, asking them questions. We have an emotional part that we use tapping for that, getting into trying to say, you have carpal tunnel syndrome. Typically what I would ask a client is, when was the first time you experienced weakness or an injury to that hand, that arm? And you know what? It's really interesting. I've never had a patient diagnosed with carpal tunnel that if I asked them that question, they didn't tell me a story about something that happened to them when they were 6, 7, 8, or 9 years old. Every single time something comes up. Well, I want to tap on that. I want to use our BET strategy, which is tapping in session. I want to make sure that that's part of every treatment to get into those emotional sources. In some cases, you can have a trauma, a medically diagnosable syndrome, deterioration syndrome, that if you could resolve the emotional origin of that alone, the old negative, unresolved emotional issues that pertain to that deficiency alone, the injury would recover. The function would be recovered. They would just no longer be disabled. Now, does that happen predictably enough to count on it, like take it to the bank? No, but it does happen. So we do it in every case because I don't know if you or my client today is going to be someone who might qualify for having a major physical recovery subsequent to having an emotional breakthrough. I don't know. Maybe you are. Maybe they are. So, and besides, what does it cost me? A minute? A little conversation? A minute? A little dialogue? What does it cost me? What does it hurt me to have an emotional addressing of the issue? Energetically, we know that there are energy lines that run through every body part. And so, what are the primary energy lines that run through the hands and through the carpal areas of the hands? Number 1 is lung. Number 2 is heart. Number 3 is pericardium. Number 4 is large intestine. So right there is 4 also biologic and or metabolic organ-related issues that we can look at, right? Can't we look at the lungs? Can't we look at a history of lung infections, pneumonia, bronchitis, sinusitis? Can we not look at asthma? Can we not look at some lung issues? What about the heart? Can we not look at the heart? Yeah, we can look at the heart. Any past episodes or injuries to the heart? Emotional injuries to the heart? American Heart Association many years ago actually documented that it is actually a fact that some people die after severe emotional trauma from a heart attack. That the emotional trauma induces injury to the heart sufficient to kill them. We have a term for it, right? It's called dying of a broken heart. For most people it's a metaphor, but according to American Heart Association, for some people every year, it's not a metaphor. They died, technically, medically, from a broken heart that was emotional in its origin. Okay? And it doesn't have to be immediate to some death in the family or what. Large intestine, colon. According to my old professor, Dr. Jensen, okay, there are trigger points and there are reflex areas on the colon that relate to the extremities. And so Dr. Jensen actually treated some carpal tunnel patients with colon hydrotherapy and colon reflex therapy and exercise to stimulate those reflex points on the colon that have to do with extremities. You can look in Dr. Jensen's book on bowel cleansing and others like it to get the colon reflex chart so you can see where those areas are yourself. All right? Those are emotional, energetic, or psychoenergetic, or spiritual energetic correlations to the breakdown or deficiency to the symptoms of the syndrome, which we call repetitive stress syndrome. Okay? All right, enough about that. Then we also have, what are we going to do with this person? So I'm going to give you a protocol right now. It's pretty simple, that if you do it for every person who has this type of injury or this type of syndrome, they will get better. Some will get so dramatically better that they could have been eligible to have surgery on a Monday, and by Thursday of the same week they're no longer eligible for surgery because they've had so much recovery. Literally massive recovery. Okay? Doesn't always happen that way, but sometimes it does. So I look for that every time I would do a treatment like that. I wholly expect that my client is going to get dramatically better. They're going to have dramatic better pain, less pain. They're going to sleep better. They're going to have less inflammation. Swelling is going to go away. They're going to have less numbness and tingling, paresthesia, neurasthenia, all of those kinds of things. Okay? I expect that. I've seen that every time to some degree or another, from really, really dramatic to just much improved. Okay? Enough so that maybe they didn't have to have surgery. Okay? And also I've done this for patients who've had the surgery and they're in that percentage that has a recurrence or recidivism of their primary repetitive stress symptoms within 3 to 5 years. Okay? And I've also worked on a couple of patients who had surgery 2 times previously for the same issue over a 10-year period of time. And now their surgeons were telling them they were no longer eligible for surgery because they'd already messed up everything that could be messed up. They had so much scar tissue and missing tissue and so on. The doctor was like, you're just going to have to learn to live with it. We recommend opiates, heroin, Oxycontin, fentanyl, we did the therapy, and so now it's, just take some really heavy drugs and just, deal with it. All right? I've worked on clients who were those people and who also had really remarkable positive responses. Really remarkable positive responses. So, who here would like to pretend that they have carpal tunnel? All right, Ken, go ahead.
Got it.
Okay, so here's my guy with the carpal tunnel syndrome, and let's say surgeon has told him he's going to have surgery on this hand to correct it because of the nerve damage, and he's developing atrophy, and maybe he's going to possibly lose the use of the arm. And if that wasn't enough, the main reason being it hurts so bad that something dramatic has to be done, and he's already had a bunch of OT and PT, physical therapy, which didn't really seem to help very much. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is as I've already done my puja, I've already done my warm up, already done that. Okay, so I'm not going to review that. This is also in the context of a therapeutic day session. This is not the only session I'm doing. I may, in addition to what I'm going to do now, still be doing a full 7-day therapeutic protocol rotating through 5 positions with a long and short general session on each end. Okay? But having said that, now what I'm doing is I understand that energy has to come from somewhere and energy has to go somewhere. Okay? This is a basic principle. Energy has to come from somewhere and it has to go somewhere in the body. All right? So energy comes from the torso and comes from the shoulder, right? From the shoulder area. And it goes through the arm, through the elbow, into the hand, and then it comes from the hand and returns back to the torso. Okay? And if we think about it, we have either 4 angles like a cross, or certainly we have at least 3 primary zones on the arm that have as many as 12 different energy lines. All right? So step number 1, okay, is I use broad, deep compression. Broad, deep compression. Broad, deep, non-specific compression. Broad, deep, non-specific compression. Why? Because some of the energy lines are superficial, some of the energy lines are deep. The bones, or the skeleton, primary circuit of bone marrow chi, or in Thai, kalatri, sen kalatri, okay, is deep inside, very hard to put pressure to bend the bones and to stimulate the flow of that energy, okay? But if I use my foot, that's why I'm going to use my foot, I have this very broad, very non-specific tool, and I'm going to start with walking on the shoulder. So I'm going to rock in, just keep my balance. I don't lift my foot from point to point, I just lift it enough to slide, and when the palm is up, I do step on the elbow. And I work all the way down, and I'm taking steps approximately the width of my foot. And I'm going to walk up and down on this arm, including the shoulder, until it turns to mush, until it turns to goo. So, how many times do I walk on that lines on the arm? I don't know. However many times I need to. Okay? If the hand's hanging off the mat a little bit, you can put a pillow or a towel under the hand. All right? Now, when you come down here, now, is this always going to be comfortable for the client? And the answer is no. And in fact, might be quite uncomfortable. Guess what? I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to be compassionate. I'm going to go easy as I introduce pressure, but I'm going to use this pressure. Now, one of the things that I found is that even clients with very severe carpal tunnel, okay, can tolerate broad, deep, non-specific compression. If I was working in here with point work, like some people do, they wouldn't be able to tolerate half the pressure. Okay? And if I get tired of using one foot, guess what? I'll come in and I'll use another foot. So I'm going to use the ball of my foot also, not just my round foot or not just my heel. And I can get in here with my heel also. So I can use my whole foot, heel, middle, and ball. Okay? And as I'm working on the shoulder, I can also change angles. Okay? So I can work on the shoulder from this angle and work my way down. Now I'm going to go palm up, and I'm also going to go palm down. Okay? Because that changes the alignment of the soft tissue, the muscles, the energy lines, and the bones. And also because in advanced carpal tunnel, the bones will be distorted and they're not going to be in the right place, okay, relative to each other. Quite often, even at this stage, you may experience bones shifting, tendons shifting in the wrist, in the elbow, and in the shoulder, even at this point, just from this broad, non-specific pressure. And if you do, that's called a spontaneous correction. It's not a chiropractic adjustment, okay? And it's a good thing. One of the things about repetitive stress syndromes and injuries to really understand is that anything that corrects alignment, energetically or physically, anything that improves circulation, either energetically or physically, will reduce the symptoms. Now, in the short term, if I flood this hand with oxygen, it may hurt more. It may hurt more. It's this phenomenon, I call it the my legs asleep phenomenon. In other words, when you sit on your foot or your leg the wrong way too long and it goes numb and it gets uncomfortable, so you move and you release the pressure on the leg or what and go to stand up, does it feel better or does it feel worse? Well, you moved it because it was uncomfortable. But boy, once you do move it and the oxygen blood supply is returned, it might knock you down, it might hurt so bad. You know, you're stomping your foot, trying to expedite it, trying to make it go faster, to settle down more faster, right? And that's because you're getting more circulation. So in the short term, and I mean by short, I mean over a couple of minutes, you may actually have an increase in pain, not a decrease. So don't look at the criteria here for effectiveness. There's always instantly and congruently and along the way a decrease in pain. Now, so you got it? Walk on the whole line. Walk on the whole extremity. Don't care. Leg, don't care which arm. Doesn't matter. And we're going to do general pressure on all four sides. Okay? And again, it wouldn't matter what the body part is. All right, so far so good? Okay? And then I'm going to go a little less broad and a little more specific, and then I'm now going to palm press. See, it's not as broad or as heavy as the foot, but it is more specific. And both hands press, top hand travels, and make sure we do both palm up and palm down. Make sure you get that forearm. This is always an issue right here. Again, how much palm press do I do? Well, until it turns to mush. Okay? Now I can do a whole routine as far as the lines and the points, right? Because I can do line number 1. Okay? I can bring that arm down, and I can do line 2, just like we do. I can do line 3. I can do line 4. And being as judicious, which means thoughtful and deliberate as possible, right? I can work everything on the hand as much as the hand will allow me. Circles, lines between the bones, twist the fingers. In other words, and I'm not going to do the whole hand routine right now, but you could do the whole hand routine. Okay? And then I'm going to show you some articulation positions, some yoga postures for the wrist that are really good for carpal tunnel. Okay? But first thing I do is, and I might even come back to this several times, is this step where we just do some loose circles. Anything that relaxes, anything that opens, anything that decompresses the joints above and below, the area that's a problem is going to be helpful. Okay? And that little compression between the fingers. You may feel the fingers correct. That's fine. All right? Okay, so first position is the thumb goes toward the little finger and your grasping fingers, your primary fingers, away from the thumb, grab at the base of their thumb, and then you put pressure right here, just below the elbow, with the inside hand, and push in and turn as far as you can comfortably. Hold for 10 seconds, and release. You can do that 3 times. And Japsen Nuat in northern, one of the northern variations, once they come here, once they get to the extreme, there's this little impulse. Okay? Now, turn the hand the opposite way. Now grabbing across the base of the little finger. Putting pressure on top of the forearm here and folding the hand in. And put pressure right at the elbow. And again, hold this for 10. Now, maybe you can't go this far. You go as far as you can comfortably. And it's pressure here. This is important. Okay? See the hand change color? Okay? And release. And since I was traumatizing my client here a little bit, let's do some wrist circles just to make nice. So far, let's review. Turn out. 1. Turn in. 2. And the hand position on the turn in can be thumb on the index finger, these fingers over the little finger, or it can even be here where the thumb is here and you scoop and push. But however you do it, palm down or palm up, there's pressure right here. And as I come in here, I may feel the bones settle or shift right there. Okay? So far so good. Nice and gentle. Lay the hand down. Get below the line of the knuckles. And use your thumb pressure. That's all you need. And just push in and project these fingers back to the heart or back along the arm to the shoulder as far as you can. Hold for 10. Now, I'm actually doing all these positions 3 times. Now, as I push forward, I'm pushing down. Again, I may not be able to go this far. I'll go as far as I can. Okay, the last thing I'm going to do in this sequence here is I'm going to fold the hand up to make a tabletop. Grab the fingers. C-clamp type of compression around the base of the wrist and gently fold the fingers straight back as if I was projecting them to the back of the arm, to the elbow here. Go as far as you can. Hold for 10. It does not matter how far you can go. What matters is that you go as far as you can. And also, if I notice I'm doing something like this and I look over and I see my client, because of the stress of having any attention or pressure here, they're holding their breath. Okay? I got to pause right there and do some pranic coaching. In other words, coach that pranayama. Make sure that they keep breathing. And in fact, if I was going to give the client a visualization, I would tell them to always breathe into the area they feel the most stress while I'm working. So if the point that they feel the most stress while I'm working is that the base of the wrist, then that's where the breath goes. If it's the fingers, that's where the breath goes. If it's the elbow, that's where the breath goes. If it's the shoulder, that's where the breath goes. All right, so here we are. Table and push in And see how as I push in and fold, hold for 10, and release, okay? And then let's just do that little loose finger circles again, just to be nice, okay? Now what I'm going to do is, Maddie, would you hand me the Pure Wave? Okay. I found this is a Pure Wave vibration machine. Love these things. If you don't have one, run out and get one today. I don't get a tip, but you can tell them Dr. J sent you. Turn it up, and we're going to start up here on the inside on the lung 1 and 2, inside the shoulder here. Remember, the lung meridian runs all the way down to the thumb. So I'm going to start there, and then I'm just going to work points, not too long, not too hard. Let the vibrator, mechanical vibrator, do the work. And I'm going to work straight down the center of the arm, all the way to the base of the thumb. Be careful of your pressure. Let the vibration do the work. Once you get to the hand, then I want you to push out on the thumb, back and forth, up and down the center, out the little finger, back and forth, palm of the hand, just hold it, and then draw lines out to the ends of the fingers. If they start itching or tingling, that's cool. They're supposed to do that. It's a good thing. And now we're going to glide up. Really work this area here. Really, 4 fingers from the base of the palm, right in here. Here's where a lot of this crossover points for the heart and pericardium are located, right in this area here. All the way to the elbow. Let's get that elbow really good. Remember, circulation comes from somewhere, circulation goes somewhere. So if there's any inhibition, inflammation, obstruction in the elbow, that's going to have an impact on the wrist. All right, now, palm down. Start with that outside line that starts at the point of the shoulder, and get the point of the shoulder. And see, it's okay, I'm off center here just a little bit. Why? Because the machine is doing the work. It's not about leverage. I'm not trying to push very hard. And basically I draw the lines, the sin lines. Now we come up on the forearm, so really get into that forearm. All the way down on that primary chakra point on the back of the wrist. The one that we start the finger lines at. That's the one. Okay. Then light line out. And now I'm going to do something that's a little different. Most people don't do this. Is I hook up under the bottom of the hand with my first 2 fingers up into the thenar eminence, into the pad at the base of the thumb, really close to the carpal area, and I lift up and push down with the vibrator. And what that does is interesting because it actually drives energy to my finger, which you cannot see, which is doing a point work, even though you can't see it. So I actually am using the vibration on one side, and I'm pushing up with my finger on the opposite side, and I'm working a line of points right here. Alright, so now we're going to come back and hit that forearm again. Nice thing about the Pure Wave, and I know this is why it's made like this, I think they copied an old mechanical vibrator Chinese manufacturer called the Dolphin. They had a very similar shape, but the Dolphin was long like this, but this part was made so you can palm it. And I'm using the round head. This is the air head. If you listen, you hear this popping, hear that little slap. Okay? That's because it's trapping air, and the air is also creating percussion. And if you came over to the mat here, you can feel the vibration in the mat. Okay, you might feel it way over there. Okay, again, how long do I use the vibrator? So it turns to jello. Okay? All right, great. I'm just going through the numbers here. Now I'm going to show you, you can leave it there. Hand me those rollers. Okay. See these? I think this one was $12 and this one was $4 at Walmart. Okay? So you got some real high price therapeutic equipment here. The beauty part about this is not only is this a high price therapeutic equipment, but I can actually take the spools off and rearrange them so that the area that is prominent or sticks out, depending on the techniques I want to use or the body part I want to work on, I can actually adjust it. I mean, come on, for 12, 14 bucks. Okay? And what I'm going to do here is these have these ridges, the irregular areas, and so look at the arm. Can you get a close-up on this? You see those white dots? So I start right on the hand. It's like I'm rolling out dough. Give as much pressure as the client can tolerate. Look, you see those spots?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, roll it out. And you can work points. And this is post vibration. Let's get in there. I like this, it works all the energy lines at one time. Now let's look at the $4 one. And see, this is more economical. I can get more pressure because the tool is multiplying my mechanical pressure that I'm using with my body. And some people say, oh, Dr. J, that's not traditional Thai. I'm like, yeah, it is. In traditional Thai medicine, there are all kinds of, the only thing that would be is it's carved out of wood. And some very similar shapes, carved out of wood. Rollers, many different kinds of rollers used in traditional Thai medicine. It's nothing new. The only thing that's new is that you can get it really cheap from Walmart. You don't have to go to Thailand. And the nice thing about plastic is easier and better to clean than teak wood. Even though a homemade, a traditional teak wood tool could be kind of nice, but they're hard to sterilize. Okay? Look at that. That's just beautiful. And you see the white, you see the red. That's the increase in oxygen. See, roll down the whole hand. Okay? Let's keep going. Would you open that suitcase? Actually, set it over here so we can get it on the camera. Okay? So this is a set. Now I'll show something. It's a little bit more advanced, but hand me those spoon, towel, all that stuff. And there should be that big bottle of lube over there too. Okay. So you can buy these kinds of sets. They start at $200 and they can go as high as $2,000. I can tell you for a fact that a $2,000 set of Graston tools does not work 1 ounce better than the cheapest version of a stainless steel tool that you can buy. Yeah, they might be a little heavier, they might have just a little bit of knurling to improve your grip when you have lubricant on them, but they don't work better because these were copied from us because for thousands of years we use bamboo. A bamboo spoon, a bamboo spatula, okay? And this is used, first of all, one traditional thing I'm going to suggest for carpal tunnel, repetitive stress, is called PIDA. PIDA. P-A-I-D-A. I-D-A. Paida. Okay? Paida, it's Thai, you see it in Thai, but I think its origins are Chinese. Okay? A lot of things we do in Thai medicine, technique-wise, originated in China because the Thais originated in China. So they brought some of their Chinese stuff with them, right? But Paida, if I could just be the most precise, polite way of describing what it is you smack the client. And you see the shape of the paddle?
Uh-huh.
Okay? Hear that little smacky smacky?
Mm-hmm.
That's how you know you're doing it right. Not so much to cause bruising, but what I want to do is I want to slap or smack. Now couldn't I do this with my hand? Yeah, but you know what? After a whole day of doing this on 18 different people, now my hands are getting repetitive stress and it's swelling up. Okay, but with the paddle, see, look at that. Okay, so we're going to go like this until we actually see some evidence of the chi circulating, till the lines actually show up and reveal themselves. Okay? Now I'm going to turn the hand over. Again, I work the whole length of the line. Try not to, you don't hit the bone. Okay? And gently over the bone and gently over the back of the hand, but do the whole back of the hand all the way down over the fingers. Again, keep the pressure within the tolerance. Now look, am I have a death grip on this thing?
No.
Look at my hand, look at it. It's almost falling out of my hand. Okay? I want that. I want kind of a loose slap. So Paida is slapping the energy lines. Paida is slap. My dad used to do Paida when I was a kid. He didn't even know he was doing Chinese medicine to correct my attitude. When he would grab a switch. And he didn't know he was doing Chinese medicine. He told me, you know, it was good enough for him and it's good enough for me. So, anyway, it makes a loud noise, but the impact really is not that bad. But look at the increase in circulation. Now remember, this is following the foot, the palm, the energy lines, stretching and opening the joints, vibration, rolling, now smacking, slapping, therapeutic slappery, slapdashery, however you like. We just say Paida. That's it's traditional therapy, you know. Okay? Now look, see how I can see that? So now I know. Now also, here's a really interesting thing. Now, of course, I think part of this has to do with counter-irritant reflex response as a neurologic phenomenon, that the pain that he had in his hand is diminishing as I'm going through this. Now you can say, well, yeah, counter-irritant reflex response, because I'm smacking him up here, it hurts less down here. Okay? But I want to ask you something, because I've asked many clients the same question right about now. Do you care?
Right.
In other words, right now you have less pain in your hand, right? Do you care why? Honestly? Do you care if it's from distraction therapy? Do you care if it's placebo? Do you care if it's counter-irritant reflex response? Do you care if it's a genuine healing response in every way, energetically, emotionally, psycho-neuroimmunologically? Do you really care? And I don't know about you guys, my clients always say, no, they don't care. As long as they have less pain and more function, they're happy. Because that's the only reason they're putting up with this in the first place. Okay? Mm-hmm. Now, I can also take the edge of this and we scrape the energy lines above and below. Now, we can go right on the joint. Spatulas like this are great because they have a little bit of an edge and a little bit of a corner. Okay? So we get in and we work how many lines on the base of the hand? Somebody tell me?
Until it's gelling.
No, but how many lines?
Oh.
5. Same number as fingers. It's actually more than that, but there's 5 sin lines, okay? And then I'm going to work, see, the medium line, inside medial, palm down. And if that's a little too abrasive, then it's really easy. Get a little bit of a neutral lubricant. I don't want to advertise this stuff, but it is actually quite good. It's really cheap. Everyone's lotion. It's really inexpensive and it's high quality, and it has the list of ingredients makes me happy when I look at it, and it even smells nice. I usually don't like any kind of a lotion that has a scent, okay? But now, how much am I going to put there? Just enough to give me some glide, and it's just repetitive in here. Okay, open up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 'See how I'm putting a little pressure here while I'm pressing out. Okay. Now, I can use a spatula. Just this is, I don't know, you go to the dollar store. They sell these at the dollar store. Actually, I think they're $1 at the dollar store. Also at the dollar store or at the Oriental Market, Chinese soup spoon. Chinese soup spoon is the best for small lines. It's ceramic. You can actually sterilize these. Line 1, line 2, line 3, line 4. Let's go with the bigger end. Line 1, line 2, line 3. And as you're doing this, you're going to feel the crunchies. Anytime you have a lot of inflammation and a repetitive stress type of injury, when you get in here and start drawing these lines through the tissue. Now, you'll find this on anybody who's ever worked in their life. But if they have this repetitive stress, inflammation, neuralgia issue, okay, they'll have a lot. Okay, they'll have a lot. You can feel it. When those crunchies go away, you're done. Because now this is like, oh, it's like a baby's bottom. Okay? But how far am I going to go? I'm going to go all the way up, right? And I'm going to go all the way up to the shoulder. And I'm going to work these lines. And I'm going to go all the way into lung. And I'm going to work these lines. You can spend a couple of dollars and you can get a jade tool, which is just a piece of jade stone. Jade has been traditionally the tool of choice for this work. And we now know, for example, that one of the reasons why jade is preferred is because it's one of the stones that attracts the highest percentage of far infrared light. So jade actually, as a crystalline structure, a lattice crystalline structure, collects far infrared. Okay? And far infrared is really good for these kinds of injuries. And with the gua sha tool, the Thai gua sha tool, you just use whichever side. For fingers, you use the notch. See how even on the carpal tunnel, if I can get these fingers to bend up a little bit and get right here in the base of the finger. Look what I'm doing. So I fold the finger up, get right at the base, and work into the base. Right there. Right there. Right there. Right there. The thumb, you can do more than one side. And then get right in to that connective tissue that runs along the carpal region of the hand. And again, this just cost a couple of dollars. This is at the dollar store. This is at the dollar store. This is at Walmart. Or go ahead and spring for your, hundreds of dollars. Okay, couple $100 if you want for your set of stainless steel Graston tools, which they copied from us, so I don't have any problem using it. Okay, and then I'm going to do exactly the same thing that I did with the other tools. All right, and again, the reason these have these shapes is so the shapes fit the body part. You see? And for this part, you want to really get in here. As much pressure as the client can tolerate. Okay, again, I like this lotion because not only does, like I said, it seems to have a good ingredient list. It has a good percentage of glide and slide, okay? But also it seems to soak into the skin fairly fast. There's not a lot of leftover, because in a minute, see, I don't really need it for the next step, okay? So now I'm going to wipe it off. Okay, great. Now, run the extension cord over here with the far infrared. You can unplug the camera. We're actually getting pretty close to the end of what I'm going to recommend for this treatment. Okay, again, this is a consumer style far infrared emitter. Okay, I like it because it's an LED based multi-LED emitter. Okay, and two different frequencies of far infrared, one that's invisible and one that's red. It has a red indicator light up here for the invisible, so that when that's on, you don't have to look at it, there's nothing to see. Okay, if that red LED is on, that means that that frequency is working. One is 600 nanos, one is 800, okay? And what I'm going to do is put this right over the most affected area, and I'm going to use both. The reason I use both the 660 and the 8, or the 640 and the 820 for the far infrared is one is superficial and one is deep and penetrating. Okay? One affects more inflammation and one affects the chemistry in connective tissue. Both frequencies reduce inflammation and swelling. Both frequencies improve or increase circulation. The red light especially increases oxygen holding ability of cells. The invisible spectrum that's being fed in here right now actually triggers a recovery mechanism in damaged cells. Far infrared as an adjunct for traditional Thai therapy is a miracle and is used in Thailand. It's used in hospitals in Thailand because the Thais are a lot of things, and slow is not one of them. And if there's a natural, non-invasive, cheap, therapeutic adjunct that can maximize the hands-on work that we are so famous for, then the Thais are all for it, and they're going to use it clinically. You won't see this in tourist massage place. Okay, you will not. How long do I leave the far infrared on there? 20 minutes. Okay, so we're not going to sit here for the whole 20 minutes, but I would leave this on for at least 20 minutes. And up to this point, my client, bless his heart, okay, is probably feeling like he did something wrong. You know, and the reason why he came in for a session was for punishment. Okay, because he did something bad, or somebody didn't like him. That's why they gave him the referral. okay? But also the way the hand feels right this second would be different. In other words, sharp pains, less sharp. General pains, more broad, less acute, more ache, okay? Right at this moment, depending on the client, there might be more or less of the numbness or tingling in the fingers, and the reason why, remember, sometimes when you increase oxygen to a nerve that's had deficient oxygen, its first response is to tingle more. It's not to tingle less, okay? However, within a minute or two, that should subside. And actually, as this sits here for a little bit, he'll actually start getting a warm feeling with less pain that actually moves up the whole arm, even into the core of the body. Remember, the energy comes from the core into the hand, and then it goes back to the body. And now the circuit of energy that's moving is moving through energy lines that are less restricted and more open, more flowing, more balanced.